And I'm going to open us in a prayer from one of our new favorites, Every Moment Holy, a liturgy for the labors of community. And then I'm going to just introduce our host tonight and introduce you all a little bit of who's in the room. But let's just take a deep breath. Deep breath. Our lives are so small, O Lord, our vision so limited, our courage so frail, our hours so fleeting. Therefore, give us grace and guidance for the journey ahead. We are gathered here because we believe that we are called together into a work we cannot yet know the fullness of. Still, we trust the voice of the one who has called us. And so we offer to you, O God, these things, our dreams, our plans, our vision. Shape them as you will, our moments and our gifts. May they be invested toward bright, eternal ends. Richly bless the work before us, God. Shepherd us well, lest we grow enamored of our own accomplishment or entrenched in an old habit. Instead, let us listen for your voice, our hearts ever open to the quiet beckonings of your spirit in this endeavor. Let us, in true humility and poverty of spirit, remain ever ready to move at the impulse of your love and paths of your design. You alone, O God, by your gracious and life-giving spirit, have power to knit our imperfect hearts, our weaknesses, our strengths, our stories, and our gifts one to another. Unite your people and multiply our meager offerings, O Lord, that all might resound to your glory. O Spirit of God, now shape our hearts. O Spirit of God, now guide our hands. O Spirit of God, now build your kingdom among us. Amen.
Amen.
So thank you all for gathering tonight on Zoom. We're so grateful we can do this. We're so grateful that we can have folks from near and far. So the purpose of this event was really meant to equip our mentors for our Horizons Fellows program. Most of you know what our Horizons Fellows program are because most of you are Horizons Fellows mentors. And you're going to be journeying with 11 fourth years or seniors at UVA this coming year, starting this month into May and hopefully beyond that. And we don't really equip you so much as mentors. Most of you all are already experienced mentors and wonderful people who we deeply respect and admire and love. So we kind of just set you off. But we're really excited to have Rick Woolworth and Jane Grizzle here. And we have a few other friends. We've opened it up to some other friends from our community, some local pastors and students, but mostly the folks in the room are mentors, and we have all sorts of mentors from campus ministers, community leaders, even a doctor. So really excited to have you all together. But we got to know Rick through, I think, a mutual contact, Karen. I guess it was Jane that connected us, our board member. So I'll start with you, Jane. Jane Grizzle is a new friend, and she's a UVA alumna and a board member of Theological Horizons. And she's had a lot of experience with fundraising, and she's lived in Switzerland. She's a really gifted writer, and she's got a few kids she's managing at home amidst everything else. And we're really excited to have her here. She is coming to us from Houston, Texas, so pretty far away, maybe one of the furthest away tonight. And then Rick is coming from Greenwich, Connecticut. He has had a long experience on Wall Street, working with Morgan Stanley, and has a real passion for mentoring and equipping mentors, and started an organization, Telemachus, in 2010. And Jane has been a part of that, so they can tell you more about that. But he has a real passion, like I said, for equipping mentors, and he's done graduate work at Dartmouth as well as Stanford Business School, where he's been really involved. And he is, as he mentioned earlier, is an undistinguished guitar player, which I hope that means you can at least play the 3 chords that can help you play any song. So I don't know if there'll be any music tonight, but we'd welcome anything. And I know Dave Petty would be all ready for that. So I'm going to hand it over. They're going to share for a bit, and hopefully we'll have time for a couple questions. But if not, I'm happy to help, if that's okay, put you all in touch with Jane and Rick. And you can put them in the chat if you prefer. You can just type your questions into the chat, and Karen and I will try to get those out there. So yeah, Jane, Rick, you can take it from here.
Well, thanks, Christy. I just wish we were all in the same room instead of on Zoom, but for another day. And I have a thank you, and that thank you is especially to Jane, for Jane introducing me initially to Karen. And my wife and I were down in Charlottesville maybe a month ago, and we had a lunch with Karen at her house that lasted 2 hours. And I feel like we were born somewhere near each other, let's put it that way. And had a lot to share and a lot more to share in the future. And getting to know you, Christy, just on our last call was really a joy. So, but I want to really thank Jane because she and Josh, her husband, have been the longest standing members of our community, which we call Telemachus. The pronunciation and is Telemachus, and what all we're about is mentoring emerging leaders, hopefully with a Christian prism, or perspective, but we will talk with anybody and do a lot with people who are hopefully seekers. So, and that's all we do. We're an intergenerational community in helping them to navigate life in all its many aspects and challenges. So, Jane, what do you want to say just as we get kicked off here?
Just that I have known Charles and Karen since I babysat their children. And then Christy, some of y'all may know my parents if you're involved with All Souls Church. My parents are Mark and Amy Anderson. So my brother John went to the church for a long time, and his wife Caitlin. Anyway, I grew up in Charlottesville, so I do have that connection. And so when these two mentoring programs are both near and dear to my heart, and when we could connect them, it was really exciting. So anything to do with Charlottesville is always really fun for me.
So just to kick off, I always feel a little awkward speaking to mentors who have been doing it for a while, and not to people who are newer to the craft. And I will say tonight, given that we have 50 minutes, that our mission is to really reinforce what you're doing. And hopefully there'll be a couple takeaways that you'll say, hey, I can try that, or might think about that in the way I mentor. And so this is really a turbocharge, if I had to pick one word. And I think the important qualifier that I always like to say is that there is no one way to mentor. Let's make sure that's clear. And what I'll be talking about is very bottom up. It's what has worked for me. I'm not a PhD in the subject, whatever, but it's just, hey, this is what I've been doing for a long time and what I've learned, and learned from others who do it as well. And I'd say also, I started a project that Jane is now helping me with. I've interviewed about 30 really outstanding leaders around the country who I happen to know, and like 10 of them are ex-CEOs or current CEOs, and they're women and men, and then there's a concert pianist, and they're generally very accomplished people from a lot of different walks of life. And it's really been fascinating to ask them 3 questions. I ask you, and I encourage you to ask this of some of your friends, and ask them, first of all, who were your most important mentor or mentors? It's really fascinating to hear what you hear back. And secondly is, what was the impact on you? And thirdly, what were some of the key qualities of those people? And it's been just had phenomenally neat conversations with people who often don't open up and are very safe. So, and Jane has been doing this as well now with some of our younger Telemachus, as we call them, so our younger mentees, to find out what their experience has been as mentees, and to hear it both ways. So some of what we talk about is coming from that perspective and what we've learned. So just to kick off, I think it's important to realize something dawned on me about mentoring that I hadn't, just about 3 years ago, that I don't think really many people are talking about, if anyone, and that is that I think when it comes to mentoring, I think we're at a whole new moment in human history, which is a really bold statement. And whenever you say that about anything, you get shot down. But when you think about, for thousands of years, we have lived in first tribes, and you had your small community. You were on the hunt around the campfire. Everything you did was with 2 generations, sometimes 3. And then we go to more of an agrarian society. And again, you lived, you worked, you died in the same community with senior people, family ecosystem. You just couldn't get away from senior people. Then when we got more urbanized, same thing tended to happen because people tended to cluster into ethnic enclaves and groups, and in church and synagogues and in guilds and apprenticeships and unions, etc. You always were with senior people throughout your career and really throughout your life. And that all changed starting, let's call it 30, 50 years ago, when now our millennials, most of them and most of the people that you deal with no longer live in their hometown. And so they no longer have the family ecosystem that every other generation has had looking back thousands of years. And also their jobs are turning over every 3 or 4 years, and they're moving often. And so, and along with the fact that their life is very complex now with technology and sexual identity, and we all know the litany of reasons. And so just at the time it's needed most, mentoring is happening the least. And the statistics show that the millennials want to have mentoring, and too few of them have it. And so, and I wrote an article that was published in Harvard Business Review that we can send around, Karen and Christy, afterwards, that doesn't get into this subject, but it's trying to wake people up to the fact that, hey, this mentoring thing is really important, and you all get it, but very few of our generation does, especially the boomers. Boomers don't. And think of how many of your friends are actively investing in the next generation in one way or another. And the average answer I get when I take a straw poll is 5 to 10%. And the demand for mentoring by millennials and Gen Z to come is very high. So what you're doing from a human history standpoint is really important. The other thing I'd like to emphasize with people, and you all are doing this, but I think when you're talking to peers and trying to encourage them to get into mentoring, to say, hey, sometimes people will say, oh, this Telemachus thing you're doing is really interesting, it's really great, sort of pat you on the back. And I've been challenged by people who say the only problem with it is that you can't scale it. It's really hard to scale mentoring. And I push back and I say, I'm not sure I agree, for the reason that if you all help to change the trajectory of one man or woman, or let's say a couple, over a lifetime, that scale is enormous. With the family systems that they develop, it really influences 3 generations. So either function or dysfunction, and organizations and communities that they're part of, et cetera. So that is scaling over, when you think about what happens over 50 years, because trajectories don't matter in the short term, but they matter big time in the long term. So I like to think that what we're doing has enormous scale, because these people are going to live, another 50, 60 years at least. And so anyway, just a couple words on the importance of what you're doing from a sort of macro perspective. I would say that one thing that we talk about a fair amount, Jane and I, with people who are new to mentoring is what is mentoring? Because it's really a mushy term, and a lot of people use it to use it in different contexts. And, whether it be career coaching and networking, advising on a particular issue, a spiritual direction, etc. Those are all good, but they're not fully mentoring in my view. So what we like to think of mentoring as, if you think, what is the ultimate objective of mentoring? And not many people who mentor have ever really thought about that. Now you all have, because you're working towards what I call, in my terms, flourishing, and flourishing in all parts of life, not just in their career, not just in their spiritual life, but it's in the, it's their relational life and their finances and everything they do. And so I like to think of mentoring as, if you think about a human being as an iceberg, and the top line, let's say the top 10, 20% is above the water line, and all the mass is, most mass is below it. And so too many people can just be mentoring that top line, whether it could be just career and a little bit of career coaching or whatever, but there's so much more to explore. So I view that the issue that is the presenting issue that you all get talking about is really a portal of entry to be talking about all the rest. Now, again, you all do that from a Christian perspective, so that's, that's certainly working a lot in that direction. But I would think that particularly over time, especially if you get to know some of your mentees beyond the 9 months that you work with them, that there's a lot to explore. So moving on, just to we talked also about what are the qualities of a great mentor. And Jane, before I do that, anything, I've covered a lot of ground here, and because of time, I'm sort of moving quickly, but
Yeah, you've covered a lot.
Talking too much, so help me out here.
I'm happy to be a different voice for you all to hear. No, I just was thinking of a story. One of the guys that I interviewed is also came to the first Telemachus gathering with me, came as a total seeker. I don't even know if he would say seeker, like that's a very Christian term. He was not interested at all, but he had met Rick and some other of the guys, I think, kind of asking questions about career at that point in 2008, because his career was in finance and specifically in some of the areas that were most affected. And over the course of time, his mentors were able to ask, and it turns out he had been recently divorced. He was having trouble with his family. And but then when I talked to him, these mentors that he had had and these peers that Rick had introduced him to through this gathering, he had moved cities to be in a healthier place. He's now married. They have a child. He's healed a lot of family stuff. It was just really neat to hear the impact for him of mentoring. Had started as a career question to a guy who was just a little bit ahead of him, or a few years. I don't know what the age difference is, Rick, but 20 years ahead maybe, and had ended up working through and getting advice in all these areas, that he now has a life that is, really wonderful. I started crying in the middle of our interview, which shows how professional of a writer I am, because I was just crying, because it was just beautiful to hear that he had asked a question about career, but because people were willing to ask the other questions, he was able to, really flourish, to use our word, in all areas. So that's just one example. I'm not saying that will happen with every mentoring relationship. Please don't come back at me if it doesn't in yours, but just an example of how having older or people just a little bit ahead of you who can help you out can really change a life.
Yeah, I think that's only 10 years, like 10, 12, and he's going to live another 50 years. So hopefully, and that's a lot of change.
Well, and in Charlotte, he's paying it forward, mentoring people who have no parental figures now. And so he's working with kids who have no examples of what it looks like to have a healthy relationship, or, he works with some really interesting young men that are in finance or, in his fields, and he's really paying it forward. So it's really neat to watch.
Thanks. So just a short clip here on the qualities of great mentors. And the two I want to emphasize, and first off is the authenticity. And we really emphasize this a lot in our Telemachus community, that we want everybody to be as authentic as possible, both, and this includes the mentors as well as the mentees. And the willingness to really share your story and the ups and the downs, as well as the, because they're looking at you, at your resume or your LinkedIn profile, and often have us up on a pedestal. And the beauty of authenticity is that it levels the playing field. and really makes us become human. And it also normalizes their issues. So if you say, oh, they got a relational issue with a boyfriend or girlfriend or a spouse, say, oh, well, I sure can talk about that. You know, I've been married 44 years this Friday, and I like to say most good marriages have at least one near-death experience, and we've had two. So what does that signal? That, hey, having relational issues is okay. It's okay to talk about it. The other is the encouragement piece. And I think one of the most important things we do as mentors is encouragement, because the performance anxieties, particularly on a campus, is so great. And now what am I going to do with my life when I get out? And I like to say, I believe in you more than you believe in yourself. I have a friend who's a great mentor who says, no matter what you do, I will not give up on you. And we have a couple of good stories about that part, which in the interest of time, I won't touch on now, but the authenticity piece, I think, is particularly important and hard often for some of us who may not be used to, either we're introverted or we're not, just a lot of boomers are just not used to opening up and sharing their story. But millennials, they really crave it. Jane, anything you can say on this whole?
I think another word that we use interchangeably with authenticity, but is different, is vulnerability. One of the things that has come up in my interviews with the younger generation is the number of, when I often ask a slightly different slate of questions than Rick does. And one of them is, what do you wish your mentors did more of? And what do you wish they did less of? There's almost nothing they wish they did less of, but the thing they wish they did more of is share times that they made mistakes and times that maybe they couldn't fix it, times that they were wrong and had to apologize. Just like with my children, I have to explain to them that there are times that I have been wrong, or, it's similar. They want to see that. They want to know that, that other people have done this. And there've been tons of studies about how from brand, choices, like even just shopping, people are looking for these authentic, vulnerable brands. So millennials are really looking for that. And anyway, the studies have just been really interesting, but that's something that if you can be vulnerable and authentic with your mentees, that will open the door to a much richer conversation, which I understand is really hard. I'm introverted. It's not my, go-to, but it's something that I have found my generation and then the younger generation, which I've been out of college for a while, so I almost am not the same generation, but that is the key to relationships for them. And I know that it's a big mismatch in terms of mentor-mentee, what people are comfortable with, but the more you can be comfortable with that, the more they will respect and really value what you say.
And we wanted to turn to just some what we would think of as good practices or best practices for mentoring. And the first one is really on this point, and that is what I do virtually every conversation I have with someone new. I do it with peers now, but whenever I'm talking to a young person, and I don't know if it's going to become a mentoring conversation or not. And what I do is I say, tell me your story. You've got 20, 30 minutes, as long as you want. Start at the beginning. I want to know about your parents, where you grew up, the issues you faced, everything, and then wind it out until now. And then once they finish, and I say, I'll ask questions. And then if you want me to, I'll tell you my story. And they always do. And there's something about doing this that just opens the aperture, one of authenticity and one of willingness to cover a lot of different issues in life. And so, for some people, this is, haven't done this before. If you haven't done it, I really encourage you to try it. And I literally have done this. There's no conversation I have now where I don't start with that. And man, I've gotten into some really deep stuff in the first session just by asking some hearing what they said, and I start asking some questions. Someone will come up and they'll hit on it in just a minute. So the second thing I do, which is very few people do, but perhaps some of you do, is I take notes. And so sometimes when I'm talking, let's say on a Zoom call, I'm scribbling down notes as I'm talking, just so that what I can do when I finish, what I do then is I'll put September 8th, Bobby Woodard, he grew up in Nova Scotia, all the way down. And so, including the issues we talked about, including some of the homework I may have given them, if you will, for the next session. And so the next session, I don't know about you, but I forget half of what they say, especially if I don't talk to them for 3 months or 6 months. And so if I have a conversation with, Adriana there, and we have a great chat, and then you tell me your story, and then we don't talk for another 3 months, I can, before the call, I'll look at my notes and say, oh, well, we talked about the issue you're having with your work life and with your boss, and some with your spouse, and I can immediately clue right back into that and say, how are you doing on that? How's it going? And so it's a little easier for you because I think you've only got one mentee, but to the extent you begin to build out more of a portfolio of mentees, I don't know how I'd do it without this, because I'd be saying that, I'd be trying to reboot on the conversation we had a month ago or 3 months ago. And I don't know about you, but I'm not going to come up with much. So, and I think it honors the mentee who's opening up their life. If they're going to share their life, I should remember something. So the next subject of practices is the whole art of the question. I do think that the most important tool we have as mentors is our questions. And, they're the paintbrush of the mentor. And I had a mentor named Bob Buford who wrote the book Half Time and lived down in Dallas. And he was a master of the question. So we'd be talking on the phone. I had an issue with, I don't know, whatever it was. And he just started asking some really probing questions. And at the end of it, I realized he never gave me any answers. And he said, you just needed to talk out your confusion. And I think that's what we do when we ask questions. And so then the question is, what are some good questions? And what we can do afterwards is send you, I've got a sort of one pager of what I think are some good questions. And we'll give you a couple of the highlights. So the first one, if you said there's only one question you could ask a mentee, what would it be? And what I like to just ask is, what is success? You want to have a successful life. You want to have a flourishing life. So let's begin to put some definition on that. So today, you're a 22-year-old. No, you're not 22. You're 80 tonight. It's your 80th birthday. We just fast forwarded, 58 years to your 80th birthday. So I want you to write down, say for the next time, just 5 little bullet points of what you want people to say at their 80th birthday. It's a reasonable proxy to begin to think about what am I trying to accomplish over the long term? What would that look like if I was to have a fantastic life? So what does that look like? Now they're only 22. They're not going to have a lot of really deep answers, but you'll be surprised at what they come up with. And then to say, okay, this is an evolutionary set of goals. Sure, your life is going to change over time and your relational life is going to change, but let's at least put something up on the board that we're going to be shooting for, so that everything that we're talking about is pointing in that direction. So anyway, I've asked that hundreds of times, because if not, I'm just kind of guessing at what is success for them. But their definition of success, to many of them, is what the culture says. So second question is, that all right, if we're trying to get you here by the time you're 80, now you got to live day to day. And there's a lot of things pulling on your time. And so I want you to write down 1 to 5, what is the ideal prioritization that you have of your day-to-day life in an ideal world? It's not necessarily the amount of time you're going to spend, but when push comes to shove, what gets 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? And then next to it, if we're to ask your best friends, your family, what actual is of your priorities, what would 1 to 5 be if we were to go out and interview them? And so I give an example. Jill and I, my wife and I, as a marriage and family therapist, and we do workshops for our community, and we've done many, many of them. And what we'll say is, I'll give an example that 3 years ago, Jill told me what she was seeing in my life. After my ideal, I'll say this publicly to people, to the young people, first is God, second is Jill, third is our daughters and families, fourth is Telemachus, 5 is everything else. That's how I want to try and prioritize my life. Jill said, what I see in your life is Telemachus first, golf second, Jill third, God fourth, kids fifth. And, so there was a serious mismatch, and I had some work to do to restructure my life, reorient my life. And so certainly I think our younger folks that you're dealing with, are certainly dealing with the pressures of everything's pulling them away from their true priorities. And so it's a nice short-term prioritization versus long-term. And then do these match? Is your actual on the path to get you to your long-term? Third question I really dig deep into is, what is your toolkit? So I think self-awareness for a lot of young people is lacking. So I want to help them get on that journey. And so what I'll say is, let's get down on a piece of paper. What are your aptitudes and talents, your giftedness, your kind of superpowers in it? And what are the environments that you seem to thrive in? Large, small, competitive, collaborative. What are those? What do the assessment tools tell you? Enneagram, I think, is by far the best. Myers-Briggs, Strength Finders, very helpful. Also, to the extent you've ever gotten any feedback in any other setting, like work, if you ever had a job, a summer job, what sort of feedback did you get? All this is data, if you will, on this human being, we're going to call Karen Marsh, right? This is who she is. And so a lot of what you're trying to do is to help them understand how God has built them and help them to, okay, let's use some of this good toolkit and be who you're built to be, and not try to be someone you're not built to be, which is so easy to do. So I'll stop there, Jane. I've been talking a long time. Punctuate any of that, if you would.
Yeah, the priorities one is particularly brutal if you ask your spouse. So lucky them, they don't have that yet. But even now, I mean, I graduated from UVA 15 years ago, and clearly not in math, but I think it was 15 years ago. And I wish more people had asked me these questions. I knew sort of what I was good at, what I wanted to do. But even now, I'm working through it at 37. What are my gifts? What are my skills? So I think when you ask them that, that's really helpful. I think, and also the thing I really like about what is success in your 80th birthday, it's like a less morbid, what do you want your obituary to say? But I think it's David Brooks who wrote about resume traits and obituary, right? Is that, I think, anyway, the idea that, are you trying to build a resume? What on your 80th birthday, are you going to care about what your job was? Or are you going to care about what your family thinks of you or who you are as a person? So I just think it's a really interesting way to help younger people think about sort of what is success and help them build that out. as to who they want to be, not just what they want to have done, but what do they want people to say about them. I think it's a valuable way for them to think about it. Anyway, those are some of my favorite questions, and I think that helping them build their toolkit as early as possible is really valuable. Knowing that will change, but especially because you're working with kids who are looking for jobs and internships and whatever, grad school. I think you have a lot of those things that.
Thanks. So next question is a touchier one, and I don't ask her on the first date, if you will, when we're talking.
You did ask us the first time you met us, Rick, just to be clear. The first time we met Rick, he asked us this question. It was great.
I usually go for the jugular. So the question is, what is the time bomb that could blow you up someday? So if you have a fall publicly or privately, what got you? What was your weakness? And if you think you don't have a weakness, let's think again. So, pick your poison: alcohol, drugs, infidelity, pornography, greed, anger, debt. And this is obviously some of these people are still in the formative stage, but I think it's really helpful for them to think about, well, what could get me? What could really sort of derail my life? And, I'd say, if you said, what was the biggest surprise you had in the last 10 years in what you're doing? I would say by far, and same for my wife who's a marriage and family therapist, is pornography, right? It is the coin of the realm. It is happening with all your students, and Christian or not, right? It's there. And I really think you need to ask the question, how will you phrase it? How you doing with this? Does it have a part of your life or not? And let's talk about it. And, to say, hey, this does not, and I like to say, hey, this, is at age 68, I'm vulnerable to that as well. And the statistics show that no matter what age, this is too much part of a lot of people's lives. So, alcohol, if they like to have a good time, or, drugs, etc. There's a lot to talk about. Anger and debt. Are they developing a good financial set of practices? Because a lot of them have student debt, etc., and they get out of college and they don't, they're not managing their lives well. So something is going to get you, and the more you talk about it with somebody, it just helps to defuse the power of it. As we all know, it's the old AA saying, you're only as sick as your secrets. I'm sure Dave Petty could add a lot on that whole topic. But Jane, anything you want to chip in?
Yeah, don't ask it when you first meet people. Set you up for some really, but no, my husband and I talk about that every once in a while. It's not like a regular, what's going to blow you up today, but we remember being asked that, and we remember that both of us had very quick answers. And I remember we were in a group with Rick and Jill, and nobody else had thought about it. And so we think about that a lot with our friends, especially as we hit an age where people are starting to really struggle and have these falls. And it was a very valuable question for us, also just to ask each other so that we knew. But so much of it is just being a safe place for people to share that with you.
You had mentioned,
hey, Dave, anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, it's just this. You'd mentioned the iceberg, and when it is probably one of the reasons I didn't go into professional counseling, because so much was hidden about people, and it seemed impossible. What I've discovered through the years is that if you are a mentor for life, or at least for many years, with someone, they may hide it. They may not be able to talk about these things, but years may pass and you're there when they are ready to share it. And that's, I have found a real rescue for people.
Mm-hmm. And I found too that when I share mine, it tends to open the aperture a bit. And I do that in front of, in front of sessions, in front of workshops. I just gotten, I gotten older and older I get. And I used to be very, I was a Wall Street guy. We hold our cards very close. But the older I get, it's like, we all have stuff. We're all fighting a battle, and we all walk with a limp. So I'm willing to share mine because, that's just part of our human nature. So the thing that the question I've been asking more and more of late, and that is to really probe into the family of origin. And my wife, the marriage and family therapist, who's upstairs, is also helped to illuminate this for me more than I was seeing it. But it seems that so many of the things that are handicapping us in various ways has to do with our family of origin. So I really go after that and say, okay, tell me about your parents. Were they together? Were they, did you have an absentee father, a controlling mother? Parents were split, addictions. Whew. Every one of those has a legacy, and then it's going to, showing up in that person's life. So I really encourage you to dig into that and just find out how, what's your relationship with them now? Are they supportive or not?
That's also something the younger generation is more in touch with. I think that we, because of family dynamic changes, again, I'm grouping myself, and they're in a whole nother level. I think they're even more in touch with it sometimes. They know what's going on with their parents, what's going on, how that's affected them. And there's just so much more knowledge about it now, and so much more conversation surrounding that I think it won't be weird for you to ask that, and it won't be hard for them to explain. I think it's pretty common now.
Dave, you've been doing this for a long time. What has this been your experience, and do you then dip into that whole subject?
Yeah, I can't get away from it, actually. So, it's getting to know you, and in the mentoring process, you see roots, you see them at work. And I can't help but see with college students, the parents that hover, or the parents that are undermining, and let's speak on the positive side of it. I can tell the great parents that are out there, how they have impacted the student I'm working with or spending time with. I really can tell. I read it all over. Yeah, I encountered it a lot.
So we could go on with more sort of questions that we ask, and I'll send you the one pager that might be helpful. And for people, especially if they're a little older, but I think it's 22. It's not too young. The next question is, who is your personal board, or your go-to team, your personal board of directors? And let's begin. What does that list look like besides yourself? Who else can they, when they have challenges, issues, who's their go-to team? And to really think about it in a very conscious way and maintain that over time. And I know I've done this for decades, because and it's evolved a lot over the years. Jill is still the chairman of the board, but there's one guy though who lives in Charlottesville, actually, who I was hoping to be on the call, and loved listening. Couldn't do it. We've been friends for 54 years, and best friends. And so he's an anchor of the personal board. But I think it's a great question to have them begin to really think about if they're not already. Jane, we have a lot of other questions on the list. Anything else that you think we should hit on before you?
No, I was just going to say it's great when you have a personal board. When I met my husband, we were both living in New York, and he took me all over the country to meet his personal board to make sure everyone was in favor. It was very intimidating. They were lovely people, but yeah, I felt very intimidated. We laugh about it now, about my tour to meet the board, but I got board approval, so that worked out well.
And knowing Josh, I'm not surprised. So one other practice that I use a lot of, and I think it's really important, is to leverage your network, to share your network with mentees. And so, when you think about what are some of your greatest assets, one of the greatest assets you have that they can access is your network of family, friends, colleagues, etc., that they can really gain from in different ways. And when you think about it too, it's the way of really leveraging your time. Because I have countless times I've introduced somebody by email to someone else, and that relationship just took off and had all sorts of wonderful outcomes. And Jane, you anything help me out here?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking of like another guy that we've interviewed. He was mentored by someone, sort of the guy was regularly checking on him. He knew somebody, he was in business school at that point. So James called Jeff, they were just chatting about everything. And Jeff said, you should call my friend in Dallas. He's looking for a guy to intern in the field that you want to. James now interns for that guy, and I think maybe has a job possibility. I don't know. But it was all because Jeff said, you should call this friend of mine. Let me introduce you. And that relationship has now become another mentoring relationship for James. So I think that you may be a great mentor for that person, but it's also possible that you know the person that is going to be a lifetime mentor for them. So it is a little bit of an ego check to say like, oh, I'm not, but all of you seem to be people who just want the best for these students. And so to say, this friend of mine might be a better mentor. Like I have 3 little kids at home. I might not be the right mentor for a young lawyer I know in Dallas, but I might know someone who is. So just thinking about those connections you can make is really helpful.
And we've been really trying to lean in, beginning to lean in on the whole race topic. And what can I do as a white male who's had a lot of advantages? And so, it's an easy conclusion that one of the things I can do is to open up my network to, some of my younger Black friends. And it's easy, and man, it's already paid huge dividends. So anyway, just file that away for when you're trying to think of ways how can I help this Black person or this family, whatever. I think the last thing we'll comment on is to we always encourage them to develop a portfolio of mentors. So, you're going to have an important role over the next 9 months. And who else should they, be reaching out to over time? And maybe this is after they graduate, but always be thinking about, okay, one mentor can't do everything. If you have one that has a Christian perspective and that is good at certain things and has certain experiences, but they're going to have a lot of gaps. And so why not fill out that portfolio over time? And it's always a moving list in different forms of development, but to cultivate that. If you ask me what was the biggest do-over you would have in your career, I had some great life mentors. I had 0 job mentors, and I think it was a big miss. And I could have developed as a professional a lot more and longer staying power if I had done that. So I'd say that, Christy, those are the things we wanted to cover as sort of content, and happy to have a conversation, questions, sure, but also comments on, hey, this really worked for me, but I'm not sure about that, which you're talking about. So
that was so.
Don't be shy.
If anyone wants to jump in, we've got a few minutes left. We can have a couple of questions. Yeah, Dave.
I want to know what you have learned in terms of if we flip the coin and ask, what is it in a mentee that really is essential for a healthy mentor-mentee relationship that you've discovered?
Interesting you asked that, because Jane and I are working on an article we hope will be published in Fast Company on this subject, actually, in part. So Jane, I'll let you start off on that.
But I need to know what, as a mentee, I need to be doing better. No, one thing is just to sort of have for both sides to have good questions. I think a curious mentee is really helpful. I think a mentee who wants to know and wants to ask. I think people who apply to be Horizons Fellows are most likely these kinds of people who are open to feedback and open to advice and asking questions. So I think you all are probably lucky to have those type of people, but I think that's a key. There is something about humility. I've seen that people who get the most out of mentorship are willing to take guidance and advice. And I think an openness, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but to different people, that your mentor might not look exactly like what you think you want to be like in the future, but you might not know. And so I think people who have an openness about who can be used in their lives to make changes, I think open-handedness, I think, and just receiving what you get is a huge part of being a good mentee. I'm not a great mentee, but I'm working on it. And those are the areas that I would like to be better in.
Yeah, what we say in this article is there are 4 practices we encourage. The first is to ask really good questions, and be thinking about what are the key questions that I would want to ask my mentor, instead of just letting it kind of flow, which is fine up to a point, but be thoughtful. Nancy, what if you had to do it over again in your career? Give me 2 pieces of advice that you would really want your self to know back when you were 22. A whole number of, but just probing questions, like, that really get to the good stuff. Secondly is to, and this may not really be work as well for you all, again, what you're doing, but plan an agenda for your meeting. Have some thought as to, okay, what do I as a mentee, want to be getting out of this upcoming session or meeting? And again, I think it's just so easy for them to just walk in and say, and let it flow, and not really have thought through in their head. It's like it's a good practice for them if they're going into their career. Anytime you have a meeting with a senior person, have an agenda, know where you want to get, and be thoughtful. Then we talked about developing a portfolio of mentors. And this is getting a little off the track of your question, David, but also what we say is make sure to find ways to say thank you. Be grateful and be creative about that. Handwritten notes are good. What I do sometimes is send flowers to the spouse of my mentor and say, thanks for being married to such a great guy or woman or whatever. So David, I don't know if that helps at all, but I think a lot of mentees just think it's going to be all about me, and you ask the questions and bring it on, rather than two-way street.
Christy, every one of those boxes are checked with Charlie from last year. He was about all of that, and he always came with questions, and his capacity to show gratitude, it was boundless, actually. He had things on his mind, that he had an agenda. He wanted to figure things out. So I'm just echoing, or at least saying, yeah. And I loved it. It made me as a mentor flourish in relationship with him.
And then you'd had the opposite experience with another fellow. So you had some,
Yeah.
right? Of, you know, one that wasn't as forthright and vulnerable and all those things.
And actually, I just wanted to add that you used the word uh, that to have a teachability. I think that the thing I was taught way long ago in turn doing discipleship was people look for people who are faithful, who are available. Faithful is different, quite different, and who are available and who are teachable. When you find that, that's going to work for you, and that kind of resonates with this list you've given. I really appreciate it.
We have time for one more question or comment on an experience you've had with a mentee or a mentor.
Rick, I'm interested in getting your thoughts on, I was always kind of coached with mentoring that I am learning as much as the mentee. And so would you just comment a little bit about how that comes out in your relationship, how you're shaped alongside of the mentee, and that it's not like I'm the mentor talking down to a mentee, but it is this shared journey of growth and teachability on my part as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm very, that's one of the beauties of mentoring, right? Is that we get as much as they do. You know, the energy, right, of spending time with these people, and it keeps you younger. The fountain of youth is the fountain with youth. And, you know, you learn things about technology and the culture. And gosh, I can't imagine my life without it. And I mourn for my peers who don't do this. And, you know, I believe at our stage in life, you look a little younger, that you have a choice. You can either de-risk, and it's easy to de-risk, right? To just kind of wind it down, close your community, your friends. I'm going to, you know, learn how to play bridge. Not a bad thing, but is that what I'm going to do? And so you can de-risk or you can re-risk. And we took it to an extreme. We moved out to Palo Alto for 18 months 2 years ago. And we're students at Stanford in a program called the DCI, the Distinguished Careers Institute. We took classes alongside of graduates and undergraduates for 18 months, 5 terms out of 6 of 2 academic years. Wow, you know, that was cool and so energizing. The problem was I feel so young, and I look in the mirror and go, well, you know, there's a mismatch here. But so yeah, I think I could go on and on about this, and that's, you know, that's the beauty of this thing. It's just it's a give and give. It's a teacher who learns more. So I'm glad you brought that up, because gosh, I don't know. Has that been your experience, Caleb?
Yeah, I'd say so. I'm approaching 40, so I still am kind of on the younger side, but living in Charlottesville has made me feel older than I felt in a long time. As I just look at the students, I'm like, I don't know what it's like to be in college anymore. And I had a conversation with my mentee, and she said, well, can I babysit? And I was like, yes, this is what I need in my life. But I just kind of approached it from like, I don't have all the answers, and let's just journey together. And I'm looking forward to just learning from her and walking together. So yeah, I think I hit the mentee jackpot, Christy.
And the last thing I'll say is that I believe the ultimate form of mentoring, you know, when it is in max state, is when it becomes an intergenerational friendship, right? And over time, this kind of relationship just goes to this. And it just happens that they're 20 years older. And why shouldn't we have friends who are 20 years younger? Right? And again, this goes back to our human history. It's happened all the time. And now we've lost it. We lost the trail.
Well, this is so great. And I love that we are all on the same page in our philosophy. We just, at Theological Horizons, we haven't spelled out all these practices and details. So it's so helpful to have Jane and Rick, and you both having all those questions and these qualities and traits spelled out for us. It really is really helpful. So I'll plan to email you all that list of questions and also that article you've referred to, Rick. And is it okay if people want to contact you that we could put them in touch?
Jane too. We're
Your social
open book. Yeah, feel free.
Wonderful. Well, thank you
Yeah.
all so much for, again, Jane and Rick. We really appreciate you all and the work you're putting into this. And man, it will be a better place with more mentors and mentees.
Yeah, thank you for all you're doing. As a former UVA student, I would have loved to have a mentor like any of you. So thank you. And as a board member, it's really fun to see you in person and hear about your experiences and know how the ministry is doing. And we're so lucky to have you. So thank you for all you do.
And as I like to say, to be continued.
That's right.
But I'll be in Charlottesville probably, definitely in the future. So look forward to meeting some of you in person.
Wonderful. Well, go in peace to love and serve the Lord, and have a wonderful evening. And I'll be following up with all of you through email. So thank you.
Blessings.
Take care.